This evening I'm hosting a pre-budget consultation. It gives residents the opportunity to hear from four speakers with regard to the budget. We have the Honourable John McCallum, who's the Liberal Finance Critic. We have David West, who is here this evening as the President of the Richmond Hill Chamber of Commerce. And Alfred Lam is here this evening, and Alfred is the Executive Director for a social agency known as Help Make Community Information Volunteer Bureau. And we also have this evening an accountant who will be here to talk about some issues as well. Essentially, be short presentations, be an opportunity for question and answers. As you know, 4 years ago we had a $12.5 billion surplus, and now we're at $60 billion deficit. And so there isn't a lot of money, there isn't any money really, but I mean the issue being, what do you do with the scarce resources that are there? What are the priorities? What do people think the priority should be in the next federal budget, which is likely to come down in February and March?
Is this the first time you run a consultation?
I've run these consultations for the last 12 years as Member of Parliament. I think they're very important because we will then do a report to the Minister of Finance based on the comments that are made by the constituents, and then we will put that forward.
How important is this kind of...
It's very important to me because I do these forums all the time. Next month I'm going to do a forum on how you become a Canadian citizen, as an example. I think they're important for people to meet others in the community, for them to share their thoughts, and for us to get good feedback directly from residents.
And how important do you see the constituents get involved with politics and all policies?
I think it's extremely important because they give us good ideas, and when we write them out, in the past when we had the Romano Commission on health care, we had written a report based on the comments from my constituents, and I was one of a handful of MPs who were able to present it directly to Mr. Romano. We've done them on foreign policy, we've done them on youth, on crime, you name it. But I think it does give the sense of participation and ownership into comments. And then at the end, once the report's sent to the Minister, we also send a copy to all the residents who attended this evening.
As a New England, do you think this should come to this kind of legislation?
Yes, and I'm very pleased. I already noticed tonight we have a number of new immigrants who are here, and I think that shows their interest in what we're doing, and it does indicate that their voice will be heard.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Hi, how are you? Good to see you. Good. Bryon Wilfert, Member of Parliament for Richmond Hill, and welcome to my town hall this evening, which is a pre-budget town hall. Next month I'm hosting an event, how to become a Canadian citizen, with a former citizenship judge. And we try to do these from time to time in order to engage residents on the issues. And we are very lucky to have four distinguished panelists this evening. The first panelist, John McCallum, is on his way. John was on the plane with me, but he's obviously doesn't drive as fast as I do. As he's stuck in traffic, but he is on the way. And John is the finance critic for the Liberal Party, and he will be giving his observations. We have David West, who is the president of the Richmond Hill Chamber of Commerce, which really is the business organization when it comes to Richmond Hill, and whether you're a large, medium, or small business. They do a lot of tremendous workshops and outreach. So we're very pleased to have David. Alfred Lam is the Executive Director of Help Make Community Information and Volunteer Bureau. 40 years in Richmond Hill, and an organization that placed this year alone over 2,000 volunteers for various agencies, organizations, and even members of council. And of course they have thousands of hits every week with regard to information. So if you're looking for the Diabetes Society, or you're new in town, you need a doctor, Help Make Community Information and Volunteer Bureau. And I'm very pleased to say that I have been a volunteer on the board for 25 years. I started when I had hair, so It was a very, very good. And Stephen Chong, I'm glad to have Stephen back. He's a chartered accountant and very well versed, obviously, in a number of areas that will be, I'm sure, of interest to you this evening. And just by way of introduction, 4 years ago there was a $12.5 billion surplus. We now have a $60 billion deficit. And of course, not to mention the national debt, which is still around $500 billion and counting. So really the issue tonight isn't about spending a lot of money, because quite frankly, we don't have a lot of money to spend. But it is about priorities. Governing is about priorities. It's about making choices. It's about deciding what is best in terms of the kind of Canada we would like to see. And what we will be doing this evening is that we will be not using your name, but we will be taking comments and we will be providing a report to the Minister of Finance, Jim Flaherty, and we will also send information to you with regard to this evening's procedures. So you'll get a sense of what people are thinking, and after the break we will then take question and answers. And because I like to be punctual, and because I can only have the room until 9 o'clock, otherwise the town will give me the boot, I have to make sure that we're on time. So without further ado, I'm going to go in reverse order, in a sense, because John is on his way. But I will go first of all to David West to say who is the president of the Richmond Chamber of Commerce for his perspectives. And as I say, Joyce Hugh, who is my community relations and volunteer coordinator, will be taking some notes with regard to the proceedings, and we can then do the report, try to reflect what you have to say. So without further ado, David, and each presenter has about 10 minutes, and if you go over the 10 minutes, I'll give you the hook.
Cool. I can talk real, like a long time, so that could be a problem. So good evening, everybody, and thank you, Bryon, for inviting us. I think this is really great that we as a community get together and talk about some of the issues that are obviously very important. So tonight what I'd like to do is talk to you a little bit about some of the issues that we see in Richmond Hill from a business community perspective. And the talk that I'm going to give tonight is really a very good collaboration from a number of key members that we have in our chamber from their perspective. You have to understand, by my day job, I'm a photographer, so like I'm an artist, right? So I know nothing about numbers, or so no disrespect to any accountants in the room, but a lot of these ideas have been pulled from our membership, and it's really important in our governance model that we do listen to our members and make sure that the voice that we speak is the voice of our members. So anyway, so I'd like to just start by saying we really do live in a great community here in Richmond Hill, and the longer I live here and the more that I get involved, the more I realize that. And we have such a great environment here. We have great parks, great amenities, good leadership at all levels of government, municipal, federal, and provincial. And I think that speaks very well of all of the things that we've done right in the last little while. Generally speaking, I think we can also be very thankful that our local economy has been relatively unscathed in this last year. I mean, it hasn't been a good year for small business, some worse than others, but I think generally speaking, our businesses have got away with this. I always say to the people at around our board table, it sucked in Canada, but it sucked less here than it sucked in the United States. So in a lot of respects, we should be happy about that we did get away with it to some degree. I think that this has a lot to do with the fact that we are far better governed in Canada in our banking system and some of our financial institutions than they are maybe in the United States. But I also think that in Richmond Hill we have such a diverse community of small and medium-sized enterprises that we're able to act nimbly to, ameliorate some of the damage that would have happened if we were, say, in a community like Oshawa that has a heavy reliance on one industry. So I think that that's an advantage that we have in Richmond Hill, and I'll talk a little bit about that later. I think that when the dust settles after all of this, we should really sharpen our resolve in Richmond Hill to promote and incubate small businesses, because I think that there are lessons to be learned from this past troubling time that we've been through, and I think small businesses in this community and medium-sized businesses as well, of course, have had a lot to play with the how we got out of this time. So the general state, I think, of the economy in Richmond Hill at the moment, I think if you talk to a lot of our member businesses, that we would generally say that we don't have a real strong belief at the moment that we're actually out of this recession. Although I noticed on the car on the way in here, CBC Radio was reporting that in the States they have had growth in the last quarter, which I think is a good sign. I also think that I just came back from a convention of the Canadian Chamber of Commerce in Victoria, and there was a question asked at the beginning of one of our plenary sessions on the general mood of the business owners in that room, and a lot of them felt, I think the question was stated that they felt moderately confident that we are on the path to recovery, but there were very, very, very few people that would be willing to put up their hand to say that they felt that we were there, and there were very few people that would put up their hand and say that we're not anywhere close to recovering. So I think that the general mood in Richmond Hill is the same. We're getting there. So in Richmond Hill, I mean, the lion's share of companies in Richmond Hill are small and medium-sized enterprises. In our Chamber of Commerce, and Chambers of Commerce, I think, across the country, I think you'll find that most of our members are certainly in that category as well. And as I said before, I think this is a sector that's alive and well in our community, although this year has been a difficult year. And I think governments at all levels need to recognize that, and particularly in communities like ours, that small and medium-sized enterprises are the ones that are going to probably be our future in this community, at least. And I think that programs and help for that sector of the economy would be important. So some of the issues that I think we've identified in the Chamber that were not surprising to me when we asked our members, like, what are some of the issues that we're really facing right now? The number one issue for quite some time in our membership has been transportation. In order to attract and retain employees, companies really need to have good access to good public transportation. Having the subway extend north to Highway 7, which of course we're talking about right now, and perhaps even further than that at some point, will have a positive impact on our community and our business community especially. All-day two-way GO Transit service will certainly go a long way to helping people move around. And perhaps even more frequent York Region Transit service on some of our more major arteries like Major Mackenzie and Elgin Mills would certainly go a long way into helping out. And as Bryon said, these projects are very costly and intensive, but I think that they're worth the while for a community like Richmond Hill, because if we don't have good public transit, one of Richmond Hill's greatest attributes, I think, is the fact that we're close to Toronto and we are close to major arteries. But if the arteries are so congested that we can't use them efficiently, I think that our ace in the hole, so to speak, in Richmond Hill loses a lot of its luster. So I think that that's particularly important for communities like our own. The other thing that became quite clear to me when we were speaking to Rob McIsaac from Metrolinx a number of months ago, he made the point and had some statistics, which had numbers in it, of course, but I'm an artist, so I didn't understand them. But the point that he was making was that we have really underfunded our infrastructure, especially for transportation, for quite some time now. And that's something that we're going to have to probably in the near future look at catching up on. And I think that that's probably a worthwhile project, and some of the levels of government are probably going to have to make some tough decisions in order to fund those types of projects. Another thing that comes up constantly when we talk about what can the government do to help small businesses in Richmond Hill, red tape has always been an issue, probably always will be an issue, and it certainly has been an issue in the past. There are a lot of levels of government right now that we're hearing from our various businesses in different sectors that are overlapping jurisdictions that are causing a lot of maybe unnecessary duplication of compliance requirements. So anything that we can do in our business community to help to encourage our governments to streamline the processes of getting, being in compliance with the various laws would certainly help businesses. Small businesses especially have a real hard time with red tape because we don't have the human resources to deal with a department dedicated solely to compliance. So it becomes a really, really onerous and very expensive task for us to have to go out and hire outside professionals to help us to be in compliance. So anything that we can do to streamline that process would certainly be helpful. And incidentally, that same theme about reducing red tape certainly is heard again and again and again whenever we deal with our colleagues across the country and across the province. Funding and financing, I think that not so much in Canada, but we've had a bit of a credit crisis in the last little while, and I think that it's very, very important to make sure that the banks and other lending institutions are willing and able to lend money to small businesses. And I think that it's probably really important right now, perhaps even more so than before, to make sure that the funding is there, because if we are on the verge of growth, having the credit available to companies to fund that future growth is really, really important. I mean, if a positive person will look at an economic downturn and recognize opportunities. Strong Canadian dollar is another problem, and particularly with anything that has to do with manufacturing, and I know a number of our members have expressed concern about that. So anything that we can do to keep our dollar in line with the, thank you, Bryon, with the American dollar would certainly be helpful. Another thing that we talk about, and it's often this issue isn't identified right away, but the issue of downloading services to municipalities from the federal and provincial governments has been another issue that we really need to contend with here in Richmond Hill. I guess it's taken me a while to understand this fully too, but property taxes is what causes, or what is basically funds the municipal system, and property taxes are not terribly fair in terms of your ability to pay. And the more services that are downloaded from other levels of government onto the municipal system puts a real strain on municipal infrastructure and municipal funding. So I think we need to be really careful with that as well. Are we doing okay for time?
This is a good time to say thank you.
All right.
And I will say that I'm sure that Dave will have an opportunity to say other comments when he hears your questions later on. So thank you very much. I'm very strict for time. I have
You're
to tell you.
a taskmaster.
I am. I didn't share the Federation of Municipalities for nothing with 65 mayors. I had to keep them all in line. They like to talk. Alfred Lam, Executive Director, Helpmate. I've introduced Alfred, and you have 10 minutes.
Thank you.
And I'll put up my finger. 1 minute.
Okay. You know, when I was young, my sister and I used to play word association games. You know, we start with a subject, and then we'll go back and forth and come up with words related to the subject until we run out of ideas. So if we say the subject was pizza or something, then we'd go pepperoni and cheese and what have you, go back and forth. Tonight we're talking about the federal budget. If we play word association games with the federal budget as a subject, we'll probably hear words like economy, jobs, spending, deficits, and so on. Chances are, if you play that game with that as a subject, you're not going to hear the words nonprofits or charities come up as a word that people normally associate it with the subject of the federal budget. Because in a lot of people's minds, there isn't that direct link between nonprofits and charities and the budget. A lot of people have this mental image of charitable organizations doing wonderful work in their local communities, and they are funded by doing things like bake sales and car washes and walkathons and Christmas donations and so on. So a lot of people in their minds have this idea that the charitable sector exists in this sort of bubble where they do their own work in their local communities and they're financed locally, largely by their supporters. And so they're quite removed from any sort of federal or national government initiatives. To really understand why the federal budget has a large impact and large bearing on the nonprofit sector in Canada, we really need to first start with a clear understanding and an accurate picture of the sector. In Canada, there are more than 160,000 registered charities and nonprofits. These organizations together use more than 12 million volunteers. They employ more than 2 million full-time equivalent workers. In total, the sector report revenue of about 112 billion, which accounts for about 8% of Canada's GDP or gross domestic product. So we're really talking about something that's much bigger than the local girl guide selling cookies. We're talking about a major part and a major force in the Canadian economic and social landscape. When you talk about the nonprofit sector in Canada and all the revenues reported by the different organizations, 49% of those total revenues come from government sources, with personal donations and gifts accounting for only 13%. So this piece of stats alone tells us that what happens at the federal level in terms of the budget has a major impact on what we do as nonprofits. There's another reality about the nonprofit sector that makes it even more critical that we are included on the agenda of the federal budget. And that reality is that so often the nonprofit sector is the first to feel the impact when there's a downturn of the economy. And oftentimes we're the last to reap the benefits of a recovery. The reason for that is pretty simple. Whether you're an individual donor or a national corporation with a giving program, the money that you give to charity is probably not what you would consider your core expenditure. So if you are a generous donor and you give, let's say, $50 a month to a local charity, and you just found out that you've been laid off from your job, chances are the first thing that goes in your budget will be that $50 a month donation. You would say to yourself, I would love to continue to support them, but I have a family. I have rent to pay. I have to put food on the table, and I just can't afford to do that right now. Well, exactly the same thought process happens in a corporation. We would love to be able to continue to support you, but we are laying off staff, we're cutting back on our core operations, and we just can't afford to do everything right now. The nonprofits that I've spoken to tell me that they've seen anywhere between a 25 to 40% drop in their corporate support in this past year. And so when the economy goes south, one of the first things that go with it is support for nonprofits by the private sector or the corporate sector. Now let's say the economy enters into a recovery period. Business is picking up, people are beginning to find work. Now for businesses and families, restoring their giving to charities is probably not the first thing on their agenda. They want to wait till to see that things are firmly on the upswing before they would commit their giving patterns again. And so that's why for the nonprofit sector, quite often we're the first to feel the squeeze of a recession, and we are the last, or among the last, to catch the air from a recovery. And to complicate things further, I think you would understand that when there's a downturn in the economy, the demands for the services of the nonprofit sector goes up. When there's money troubles at home, for instance, family issues erupt. So the demand for family counseling services go up. People who are unemployed require employment services, job search workshops, career counseling. When times are tough, people use the food banks more. Under the stress of a recession, more people suffer from depression and other mental health issues, and so the need for those services go up. And so in difficult times, the nonprofit sector faces a triple whammy of decreasing resources, delayed recovery, and higher demands for our services. So in essence, we have to do more with less and hold out longer to see new resources come in. Most local charities are small operations, and they simply don't have the reserves to keep providing more and more services while trying to ride out the difficult times. So as a sector, what do we look for in the federal budget? In broad stroke terms, let me offer two things. First, most obviously, we look for governments to provide federal funding to our sector. Traditionally, a lot of that kind of funding goes towards either infrastructure projects or time-limited projects. But as organizations in the nonprofit sector, what we need is sustainable core funding. We need the government to recognize the work that we do and give us the stability that we need so that we can keep delivering those services. Secondly, we look for governments to encourage personal giving and donations through enhanced tax incentives. That was something that the nonprofit sector had hoped to see in the 2009 budget but did not get. we recognize that people give first and foremost out of a generosity of spirit. But if they know that their giving would also be rewarded in terms of additional tax incentives, that would only serve as a further encouragement to give. And as I said, that was something that the sector had hoped for in 2009, but didn't see. And now we hope again that we will see that in the next budget. Finally, let me just end on this note. When the government provides funding to the nonprofit sector, the money goes towards much more than just building of infrastructure or delivery of programs. The government is actually investing in the nation's most valuable resource, and that is the Canadian people. You know, in my work every day, I meet person after person in this sector who work tirelessly long hours for low pay, practically non-existent benefits, cramped resources. My own staff at Helpmate had literally worked without a raise for 10 years. I visited another nonprofit organization the other day and was told that they want to host a party to appreciate the volunteers, but unless they get sponsorship for a $40 cake, they can't afford it. One of my staff at Helpmate came to Canada as a refugee. She now is working for Helpmate because after receiving help, she wants to be able to provide help. And that, I have learned, is the Canadian spirit. The spirit that says it doesn't matter where we come from, this is our home now, and we want to work together to make this a better home for me and for others. What we look for from the government is that sense of dignity to recognize that you're doing important work. We can't do that from Ottawa, but we want to make it possible for you to continue to do what you do. Thank you.
Thank you, Alfred. And it's a bit ironic, but some of you may or may not know that this week the Council of Richmond Hill has indicated that as of the 31st of December, the $78,000 that Helpmate receives, which employs 2.5 people and provides over 2,000 volunteer placements, etc., will be receiving no money. So they are in fact terminating after a very long relationship. There were 18 delegations at council. I was one of them on Monday night, and I can tell you that when Alfred talks about the difficulties for nonprofit sector and for all those people in the social service area that need Helpmate, this is going to be quite a blow. So, I've editorialized. Steve Chung is a chartered accountant. We've had Steve out before. He does a great job, and so, you know, when you're good, we have you back. So we're really pleased to see that. I want to, before I go to Steve, just welcome the Honourable John McCallum, my colleague from Markham, who will be also addressing us this evening. And I also want to recognize a former colleague of mine who now lives in Richmond Hill, Sarkis Asadurian, and former Member of Parliament and former Citizens Court Judge. So welcome as well. Without further ado.
Thank you, Bryon, and thank you for inviting me. The federal budget for 2009 actually occurred on January 27, 2009. It's 9 months old, but this may be a good time to refresh ourselves as to what was said and what was intended. The federal government at the time, I think in some of their announcements, I just made my own notes, their objective was to stimulate the economy, strengthen the financial system, support Canadian workers, stimulate spending, promote housing, and build infrastructure. All great objectives. Keep in mind, by January of this year, our recession was in its full effect. I remember the first tremors were probably, I think, late August and then September, and by November, December, we were all, I think, all very worried what was going on, especially with what was happening in the United States and how it affects Canada. And so by the time of January 27th, the federal government knew we were in for a big economic shock and major adjustments were required. Their their projected deficit for 2009-2010 was 33 million. Now, I'm relying on Bryan's up-to-date information. He said at the beginning of this talk that we're already at $60 million plus.
50 billion, yes.
60 billion, sorry, 60 billion. So can you imagine spending or our deficit being double to what was projected 9 months ago? Double. And that's a little scary sometimes. You know, billion with all those zeros behind the billion. I can't even imagine where and how the money is being spent. You know, I'm referring back to what David said earlier as the first speaker. You know, like the idea is hopefully the money is going to infrastructure. That also includes Richmond Hill. The only problem is when you're dealing with infrastructure, whether it be subway, new roads, new highways. Well, how many people have seen any new roads and new highways in Richmond Hill? Has anybody? Nobody. So the money has not, and the economic effects have not taken place, and we're already at a $60 billion deficit. And when it comes to infrastructure, yes, I think as citizens of Canada, we should properly understand and accept that it will be more than a 12-month process. But again, hopefully the benefits probably will not be realized for another year, 2 or 3 or 4. Some of the matters from the January budget. Can I get by show of hands? Are there any business owners here? Business owners? Okay, there's a handful because there are, you know, the budget did address business owners and individuals here in Canada. For the business owners, they were providing an extended tax break for anybody owning what is called as a Canadian-controlled private corporation. Anybody who owns a Canadian-controlled private corporation and operates an active business, they're subject to a flat income tax rate of only 16.5% in Ontario for up to the first $500,000 of their profit. Now, 16.5% is actually probably the lowest combined federal and Ontario provincial corporate income tax rates I've seen in my career as a chartered accountant. Why is it low? The reason's very simple. They want our small, medium sized businesses to jumpstart the economy, create jobs. They were also offering accelerated write-offs. If you're in manufacturing and processing, there's faster write-offs on your new equipment. In any business owner, if you're buying new computers, they're offering a temporary 100% tax write-off on new computers. So if you are a business owner and you have bought new equipment, new computers, you are entitled to a quicker write-off to save against your income taxes. Although not a federal issue, I thought I'd raise it. This is brought on by the province of Ontario. If you are in a position to hire a university or college co-op student, there are provincial tax credits of up to $3,000 for every 4-month session if you hire a co-op student. Okay. Back to the federal provisions from the January budget. To help the individual taxpayers, they did increase the lower tax brackets that will shelter more income in your lower tax rates. One of probably the more innovative and I think more helpful tax breaks they offer to the taxpayers. Can I get a show by show of hands? Does everybody know what the new home renovation tax credit is, and have you used it? So we got a couple hands. Does anybody want to know more specifically what it is? Okay, I'll just cover it very briefly. You have until the end of January January 2010. If you incur any significant home renovation to your own home that you live in, we're not talking investment properties or your rental properties, but to your own home, you'll be eligible on a 15% tax credit on home renovation expenses over $1,000 up to a maximum of $10,000. And on a $10,000 renovation, whether it be to your kitchen, to your bathroom, new flooring, replacing your roof, that on a $10,000 expenditure, that's worth a $1,350 tax credit. That will end at the end of January. If you are thinking of doing it, have it done soon, because I can imagine in the months of December and January, a lot of contractors are going to be very busy with some last-minute consumers wanting to renovate their house and take advantage of the tax credit. The procedures for this is very simple. If you get renovations done to your house, keep the receipt. Hire a contractor that will give you a receipt. Other new tax provisions from the last budget. If you're a first-time home buyer, there's a first-time home buyer's tax credit that's worth up to $750. They changed the rules for if you're a first-time home buyer and withdrawing from your RSP. Under the old rules, you can withdraw $20,000 from your RSP to help buy your home. Now it's up to $25,000. For the seniors, the age tax credit has been increased, and the age tax credit is now only phased out if you're earning more than $75,000 a year. And let's see what we have here. Okay. And I was listening to what Alfred was saying. Yes, it's true. The last budget didn't really have anything significant regarding addressing charities in the nonprofit organization sector. But historically, my observation is over a number of years, although not consistently every year, they do bring in adjustments to the tax laws to provide some relief and help to the charitable sector. Not this budget, but the previous year's, the 2008 budget, they did bring in some rules to make it easier for people to donate to charities if they were donating publicly traded securities on the stock market. They were providing a capital gain exemption if you're donating your securities. Although with this stock market the way it is right now, how many people have capital gains?
And on that note, I would thank Stephen for that. And again, we'll be coming back to Stephen and others when we do the question and answer period. Now, to use a baseball analogy, John McCallum was going to be our leadoff batter, but he's now going to do cleanup. So I'll leave it to John. And you have 10 minutes.
Thank you, Bryon. And good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm sorry I was a little late and missed the first speaker, but just got back from Ottawa. I had to stop downtown on the way, and you know the traffic. So here I am, and I'm delighted to be with you this evening. Before getting into what I was trying to say, let me just respond quickly to Alfred, because he was talking about the non-profit sector. And as the finance critic for the Liberal Party, I'm a member of the Finance Committee, and we've had more than 400 submissions of what people want the government to do in the budget, and about 200 live witnesses, which we've been hearing in the past several weeks across the country. And we've heard quite a lot of representations from the nonprofit sector. And I totally agree with your analysis. The needs are up, the resources are down, and you're squeezed. So I can tell you that we on the Liberal side, we're not the government, but we on the Liberal side, will be recommending that funds at least be frozen, if not increased, but certainly not cut. And on the charitable giving side, we've had two interesting proposals. One which would increase the amount you can deduct for charitable donations if you give more than you did the previous year. I think that's a good measure that would be helpful at this time. And another, which is a more top-down approach, if you give land to a charity, then you don't have to pay the capital gain. I tend to prefer the first. You could do both if you had the money, but I'm hoping that there will be some assistance for your sector. But now to take a step back, if you consider first the economy. The world has had its worst recession since the 1930s. And if you go back a few months, it looked like the sky was falling down and we didn't know where it would end. But governments around the world, central banks stepped in aggressively, and now it still doesn't look great, but it doesn't look as if we're falling into a bottomless pit. So I think what most economists are saying right now is that we might be technically out of a recession in the sense that the economy may not be shrinking anymore. But jobs are what counts for most people. Jobs always operate with a lag. They're like the nonprofit sector. They're the last to come back. And so most economists are predicting further job losses, further increases in the unemployment rate for the next 6 months to a year. So we're still in difficult times. And the question is what we should do and what we can afford to do. So let me begin by commenting on what the government has done, and then say a few words about what we Liberals would do differently. Well, if you go back to the January budget, that was at a time when the economy seemed in crisis, and the government was promising to give a stimulus to the economy, put billions of dollars into the economy for infrastructure and other things to create jobs and prevent the economy from dropping further. So we, as a Liberal Party, as the official opposition, while we didn't think the budget was perfect, we would have done things differently in many ways, we thought, given the economic crisis we were in, it would be irresponsible to bring down the government at this time of crisis. So we supported the budget, and the government didn't fall, and the budget went through. But we supported the budget on the grounds that they would get the money out the door, especially for infrastructure. Billions of dollars in infrastructure were committed. Shovel-ready, so-called shovel-ready projects were ready. The mayors were keen to go. But the problem is that very little of the money has flowed. Just this morning at a Finance Committee meeting, for example, we had the head of the Cement Association of Canada who confirmed that there's only 1 month left of the construction season, and this year has almost been a write-up. Our calculations are that 12% of the money that was supposed to get out the door has gotten out the door. So we supported the budget on grounds of getting money out the door, creating and saving jobs, and I think that was the right thing to do. But we're very disappointed that so little of the money has gotten out of the door, and so little money has been able to create and save those jobs that are desperately needed today. And as Bryon would know, having been in municipal politics, there was an alternative way of getting that money out, which the mayors all supported, the so-called gas tax transfer method, which would have flowed the money pretty well straight to the municipalities, and they could have acted a whole lot faster with projects that they wanted to do. And had we done it that way, we would have created and saved a whole lot more jobs than we have, in fact. So I don't want to be too partisan. We've also been arguing that the government's expenditures have been biased towards conservative ridings, and that some of the money has been wasted. And for example, $500,000 for a soccer field for a private school with 160 students. But our main point is not that. The main point is that it was fairly ineffective in that not nearly as much has been done as could and should have been done to help the job situation in this country. So I think the best part of these things is the discussion. I don't want to talk too long, but let me just give you 3 points of how a Liberal government would do things differently. And this is more going forward. We're not going to rewrite the past, but I want to give you 3 areas where we have a different view from the government as to how to not only get this country moving, get this country out of recession, but create jobs, but also to provide the growth that we need to do well in the future. Because a lot of the jobs that have been lost are not going to come back. And so we need to create an environment and a stimulus that will create those jobs of the future. And we need also to deal with people who are falling through the cracks. So the three areas I will mention are: one, social policy, or what you might call the care agenda; second, the jobs of tomorrow; and third, an area that is really important, pensions. So let me deal very briefly with each of those three. The care agenda. As Alfred pointed out, a lot of people fall through the cracks during tough times. And we are committed to policies that help those people who are falling through the cracks and create a sound social policy. For example, childcare. We think childcare is crucial. We have implemented it when we were in government, but it was reversed. Affordable childcare spaces are important, and also important, and increasingly important with an aging population, is what you might call elder care. All those people who look after aging parents or other relatives need some assistance. We need a stronger set of policies, not just for child care, but also for elder care. I think we need to put in place policies and actions to promote the jobs of tomorrow. And here's where we are quite different from the Conservatives. We think the jobs of tomorrow will, to a large extent, involve research and innovation, development of new products, new ideas, commercialization. And so we would not have cut funding to research. We think policies to promote growth in the jobs of tomorrow, new ideas, innovation, that those things are critical if we are to build the kind of economy we want for ourselves and our children. And finally, pensions. And I mention this because we had a round table on pensions just yesterday, or a few days ago, where we had a dozen or so experts. We're going to be coming out with policies on pensions soon. But pensions is potentially a crisis area. Pensions is a huge issue because the market has dropped. The defined benefit pension plans are going the way of the dodo, and so many Canadians, especially those aged, say, 45 to 60, are worried about where their retirement income will come from. So I think Bryan's suggesting my time is up, but I will just say to you, and in the question period you can ask me if you want, but we will have a policy of not only pensions, but measures to help Canadians save for their retirement years. So the care agenda, social policy, helping people who fall through the cracks, a set of policies to create and promote those jobs of tomorrow, and measures to address the retirement income security of Canadians. Those would be items at the top of our agenda. So thank you all very much.
Thank you, John.